Welcome, everybody. My name is Spencer Arnold. I'm the Director of Operations for the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship, and I'm also the Director for this evening's event. Welcome. A few announcements before we begin. The event will be recorded, and your image and/or your voice may be captured. If you do not wish to be recorded, you can please go ahead and exit the auditorium at this time, and we will make this available to you on the web. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is tonight. This is a colloquium event for certain ESS students, so to receive credit for this event, attendance sheets will be available in the lobby at the very end of the evening. Professor Stuart Frey will be available, so to go ahead and take that. So at the end of the evening, you can get credit. Food and beverage is not allowed outside the auditorium, so please keep food and beverage inside here, please. And last but not least, please silence all your mobile devices. That would be great. It's now my pleasure to welcome the president of Santa Clara University, Father Michael Engh, to the stage. Father.
Thank you very much, Spencer, and I love having my picture taken. I want to say welcome to all of our students, the faculty, the staff, all of our guests that are here tonight. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our evening's guest and to kick off this ongoing discussion of how we can take care of our common home. Dr. Sylvia Earle, oceanographer and National Geographic Explorer in Residence, and Jonathan Knowles, Explorer in Residence of Autodesk, and Dr. Thane, Kreiner, the Executive Director of our Miller Center, will discuss the importance of the ocean related to life on Earth. They can also help us see how science, conservation, design, and technology must unite to preserve our oceans. Dr. Earle is world-renowned for her efforts to safeguard our oceans. She has received more than 100 national and international honors for her work that explores conserving and developing new technologies to protect marine ecosystems. Jonathan Knowles explores what's next for Autodesk with a view into the future of 10 to 100 years. That's a great long view, so thank you. One example of the work underway at Autodesk is digitizing the coral reefs to understand the environmental impact due to rising temperatures. Coral reefs are significant because they provide a home for 25% of all marine species. And last but not least, Dr. Thane Kreiner, who leads our Santa Clara Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship. One of the Miller Center's strategic initiatives is supporting social entrepreneurship focused on climate resilience. And as for millennia, oceans have supported human life on Earth. They sustain life as we know it. Protecting and restoring them has far-reaching implications that are tied to the Pope's encyclical Laudate Si and caring for our common home. Climate change and rising sea levels that threaten coastal communities, food security in developing world economies, and lifting the poor out of poverty by providing them access to sustainable seafood supply chain. These are all connected, and tonight we're going to see how these connections all function. So our conversation will set the stage for the screening of the powerful documentary that exposes issues of endangered species and mass extinction. The film, Racing Extinction, will challenge us to think about what immediate steps that we can take to help safeguard and restore the ocean. So whether you're studying business, science, engineering, or the arts, we all have an important role to play. So I want to thank you again, all of you, for coming tonight and supporting this event. We hope you enjoy the evening and come away inspired to act. And with that, let me turn it over to Thane Kreiner. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Engh, and welcome Sylvia and Jonathan to Santa Clara University, the oldest university in California. We're very pleased to have you here. As Father Engh said, we will continue our conversation on care for our common home, which started with the visit of Cardinal Turkson, widely credited with authoring a lot of Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical on care for our common home. And I think what brings us together tonight is really a shared awareness of the damage that we're doing to our environment as human species, and very quickly getting to a point where that may be irreversible. So while nature is resilient, we've done a lot of damage to it, and we've accrued what Pope Francis would call an enormous ecological debt, and that's primarily driven by the developed nations of the world, and it primarily impacts the developing nations and the poor of the world insofar as the human species is concerned. So tonight, we're going to focus very, very much on the oceans, and that will set us up for the film Racing Extinction. And I personally have a great love for the oceans. In fact, I just got back from a 10-day dive trip in the Maldives 2 weeks ago, which sounds fabulous until I met these people and found out that Sylvia has been diving since like 8 years before I was born.
Yeah.
Yes, 1953. And Jonathan has been diving since 1974, when I was still in junior high. So I'm a neophyte, even though I'm near 400 dives. What struck me on the Maldives the most, I was there in 2008 also, so it was only 8 years later. The sharks were great, the manta rays were great, but there were huge die-offs in the coral reefs. And to witness this devastation with my own eyes was really kind of a wake-up call. The change is happening very, very quickly to our planet and to our oceans. Some of our most important and vulnerable ecosystems are disappearing. And we'll talk about what that means and what the implications are for us and for life on our planet. I want to acknowledge a very, very special person, Dana Christensen. Dana, could you please stand up and take a bow? Dana is an alum of Santa Clara University, and she had the vision to really bring together the innovation and entrepreneurship inherent in Silicon Valley with the heart and the expertise of ocean conservation. And this is the kind of convergence that we imagine when we talk about our STEM vision for Santa Clara. How do we bring together the Jesuit tradition of serving the poor and protecting the planet in the world's most entrepreneurial ecosystem and help us address the most pressing problems of poverty and the planet? So you might wonder at this point why the executive director of the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship is here facilitating a discussion on protecting the planet and what the connection is. And if you've read Laudato Si, you know that climate change affects the poor more than anybody else. And we believe that entrepreneurship provides a path out of poverty. So what we do is connect Silicon Valley with social enterprises that are serving the poor. And we've done that with about 500 enterprises in 65 countries around the world since the GSBI program was started in 2003. Father Engh mentioned our Climate Resilience Initiative. What we're aiming to do there is really help social enterprises that are creating resilience, the ability of poor communities to adapt to climate change through things like food, energy, water, and health, all of which are impacted by climate change. So I think that sort of preface sets up our first question when we start focusing on the oceans. Why are the oceans important to life on Earth in general, Sylvia? And what should we know as we think about what we can do here in Silicon Valley?
Well, it starts with the water, of course. All life requires water. 97% of water on Earth is ocean. Only 3% is fresh water, and it's tied up mostly in polar ice, mostly in Greenland and in Antarctic ice. Of course, we all carry water around with us. That's part of the equation. The water in the clouds, lakes, rivers, streams. But the ocean is where the action is. The ocean is the planet's great thermoregulator, holds the planet steady within a relatively friendly range of temperature for life as we know it. We are biased in our perspective because we're terrestrial. We breathe air. Well, I do, don't you? And where does air come from? Where is the 20% of the oxygen in our atmosphere? The rest of it nitrogen and trace gases, including just enough carbon dioxide to power photosynthesis. We need carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in order to drive that process that generates oxygen and restores that oxygen portion of our atmosphere. But where does that take place? Well, of course, in the green stuff, the mosses and ferns and trees and grasses, all the stuff that we know about on land. I used to have a bumper sticker when I was a student at Duke as a botanist. Have you thanked a green plant today? Huh. Because if you like to breathe, you'll listen up, you know? But it isn't just the generation of oxygen, it's the capture of carbon that drives the great food webs. Photosynthesis, man, you know, without it, we couldn't exist. Without water, photosynthesis could not exist. So most of the action, as biased as we are, we need to think globally, look at the world as we now can. It's mostly the ocean. That's where most of the oxygen is generated. It's where most of not only the green stuff, phytoplankton and other organisms that capture carbon, generate oxygen, hold the planet steady. It's the ocean. And it's only fairly recently in our history as humans on Earth that we have gathered enough evidence, enough information that passed on from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And here we are, early in the 21st century as humans measure time, for the first time in all of our history, aware of our complete and utter dependence on the natural systems that shape this planet in our favor. There are a lot of other things out there in the universe that look beautiful, but they're not friendly to us. Not even the moon, not even Mars, our sister planet. It looks tempting. If you just, you know, go off to Mars and set up housekeeping. Have you seen The Martian film? Yeah. Where does oxygen come from? Where does water come from? Where does food come from? And here we take it for granted, at least until right about now. Not only did we take it for granted, we could take it for granted. And here's the thing, now we know, no more. We have to consciously look after our life support system. There is compelling evidence everywhere that humans, now 7 billion of us plus, armed with technologies that have the capacity to alter the nature of nature on a scale that is unprecedented in the history of the planet. I mean, comets can alter the nature of nature. You know, volcanoes firing off simultaneously, as apparently they have at times in the past, have altered the nature of nature, but no individual species has the capacity to do that other than humankind. And we only in recent times have reached that level of the ability, the technological capacity to have such a profound impact on the air, skies above, on water everywhere, fresh water and ocean, and on the fabric of life itself.
So the oceans are the life support system, not just for humans, but for
Life.
many, many species.
Life.
All ones.
No ocean, no life. No blue, no green.
No blue, no green. Okay. So that's some of the science behind why the oceans are important. Jonathan, you're at Autodesk. I don't know if there's an engineering firm on the planet that doesn't use your software.
We're certainly a market leader.
Certainly a market leader. Why does Autodesk care about the ocean?
First of all, I'm going to take my hat off. I wore it up here.
An explorer's hat.
I
We have
see
two
that
explorers here.
You're a fellow hat wearer there. This was a gift from my dear friend Sylvia here, so very proud of my hat here.
Indy.
You know, we're here in Silicon Valley, obviously. We make a lot of tools at Autodesk and have for many decades. Tools that scientists, engineers, designers, architects, and others use to do what they do. And it turns out that the only way we're going to solve some of these problems that Sylvia has talked about is through innovation and the application of some of these technologies to do it. As a matter of fact, something you said earlier, that no matter what you're studying, it's important for us all to understand just how important what Sylvia just said is. Because the only way that we're going to solve the problems that we face with our ocean is to get not only all the scientists to continue working on it, but the lawyers and the finance people and the marketing people and the educators.
The artists.
The artists. We will never solve this problem unless we get everyone on board. We recently were at the White House together talking about citizen science. And again, everyone needs to be a scientist. The only way we're going to do this is if everyone becomes some sort of scientist and everyone starts really thinking about it and starts being a part of helping with the innovations. The good news is that there are tools that are going to help people to do that. Never before have the tools to actually go out and do something been more available. Father Engh mentioned capturing the coral reefs. We've been working with several coral reef researchers to do what we call reality capture of these coral reefs. That's a technology that is super easy to use. Every single person in this room can use it, and it's free. Everyone should be out using these kinds of tools today because you can and because it's important. There's still, I believe that one of the biggest issues around all of this is simply awareness. People just don't know. You mentioned your bumper sticker when you were in school, and that's because back then, right, we all did this, especially our age group. It was all about, hey, save the rainforests, man. The Amazon rainforests. That movement, that sort of granola-eating hippie movement that we make fun of now.
Is that what we were?
Yeah, kind of. That never, people like Yul Gibbons. How's that for a name?
I remember that.
Some of you are laughing. That never happened for the oceans. I'm not sure why that is, but people just don't know. Sylvia rattled off some statistics earlier. Everyone thinks, we have to stop rainforest deforestation because we need the oxygen the rainforests create for us. More than half of it comes from the ocean. And there's a lot we don't know still as a species about our ocean. And this movement needs to happen. People don't know about one of our favorite little organisms in the ocean, Prochlorococcus.
Yeah.
We're big fans of Prochlorococcus. Humanity didn't know it existed until 1986, when Penny Chisholm at MIT discovered it. And it turns out it's probably responsible for about 20% of the oxygen on planet Earth. And we've just learned about it. Since 1986, we've known about it. So people need to know these things. People need to completely and deeply understand what no blue, no green means. And these tools, these same kind of tools that we make, they're also used by filmmakers and game developers. So we wrote the software for Jim Cameron to make Avatar, for example. And all those special effects you see in movies, that is all our software as well. And people, you folks, everyone, get out and tell these stories. Let's tell the ocean story. Let's get the awareness up as a first step. As a second step, let's get these tools and start innovating on the solutions to fix these problems. And at Autodesk, that's what we're focused on, is making tools to solve problems.
So technologies to solve real-world problems.
Absolutely.
This is exactly what Pope Francis calls for in Laudato Si. And one of the things I was mentioning to Sylvia during the reception beforehand is what I called a remarkable convergence. She actually thinks should have happened a long time ago because there's a lot of evidence. But when you read Laudato Si and you hear the spiritual call to action to preserve the planet and care for creation, and you look at what Pope Francis talks about, you can actually crosswalk that almost exactly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and a huge body of evidence and science. And they're saying the same thing. Some of the Sustainable Development Goals have to do with conserving the oceans, with combating climate change, with circular models of production and consumption versus overconsumption and waste. And so what we see is, from my perspective, that this really amazing convergence of thought between the spiritual and the scientific, all calling us to action to do the same thing. Now, the other thing that I think is really interesting in both the Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si is the outsized impact of climate change on the poor. But in fact, one of the things I've learned in our brief conversations with Jonathan and Sylvia is this interconnectedness, another theme in Laudato Si, between everything. And you heard Sylvia talking about this with carbon cycles and oxygen cycles and so forth. But can you talk a little bit more about how humans interact with the ocean and our dependence on them from your vast body of work over many years? And yeah, please.
Well, somebody asked me years ago, it was a reporter in Australia, if the ocean dried up tomorrow, why should I care? She said,
I know some people who say the ocean, I wish it well.
Yeah. And she said, I don't swim, I get seasick, I don't eat fish, people don't drink salt water. You know, the ocean, so what? And I suggested that she consider Mars. There's no ocean there, you know? And it's not just the water. I mean, the water is key because without water, life that shapes the character of the planet could not exist. So, rocks and water, that's the starting mix. But then it's life that over a very long period of time has shaped the nature of the planet. I mean, if we took ourselves back 1 billion years ago, we'd just try breathing. 1 billion years ago, there was not enough oxygen yet in the atmosphere to support life as we know it. There's water, there was life, mostly microbial, mostly maybe entirely microbial, based on the best evidence that scientists have been able to muster. But here we are with a planet that works in our favor. And it's only right about now that we have accumulated enough evidence and the ability to share that evidence widely that we are beginning to get it. Why are these convergent things coming together right now? Because now we know, for the first time, at a level of awareness, of knowing, humankind actually has the potential for taking decisions to secure an enduring place for ourselves within the natural ocean-dominated planet that makes everything that we care about possible. I mean, President Obama made a remark a couple of years ago that resonates with me. He said, our highest priority must be to keep the world safe for our children. Oh, he was thinking guns and things. And, you know, that's a big deal, big problem these days, all those weapons out there. But it's keeping the world, the natural world, the planet, that underpins everything we care about, that fundamentally it's the ocean that has held the planet steady while we have eroded away much of the components of the terrestrial parts of the planet, drawing down the assets, cutting the trees, eating the animals, killing the birds, using up the soil, diverting the water. We've done not a really great job of being stewards of the land. But through it all, over thousands of years of human impacts, as our numbers increased it took a long while to get to 1 billion, 1800. When I came along, there were 2 billion. By 1980, 4 billion. Now we're looking, edging up toward doubling that all over again, and Earth stays the same size. The people, the needs of the people, the requirements to make not just our prosperity, but our very existence possible. We've not been good stewards. We have squandered the assets on the land, and now we're doing the same thing, but not over thousands of years, in decades, armed with technologies that cut both ways. Technology to enable us to explore, to understand, to communicate, to gain knowledge, maybe even wisdom, but technology that enables us to find ocean life, to capture life in the ocean, to market it half a world away, not feeding families and communities locally that have few choices, but luxury tastes are being served globally because we have the capacity to extract on a scale that is unprecedented. We're clear-cutting the ocean in decades. So when I began diving in the 1950s, think about it. Sharks, their populations were pretty healthy globally. Now down to 10% of what they were in that much geologic time. Some species down to maybe 99% gone. The oceanic whitetips, really hard to find even one or even with a lot of looking. Tuna, and it depends. Bluefin tuna in particular have been hammered because, why? We've developed this luxury taste for sushi and sashimi, and we...
Yeah, how much does a bluefin tuna go for?
Well, their numbers go down, the price goes up.
Yeah.
So you can still make a living by catching a few. And one sold for $1.8 million 2 years ago.
One fish.
One fish.
One fish.
So it makes it really worthwhile.
And
to
the
catch.
scale, when you were talking about clear cutting, I don't think people realize how big those nets are that are on these boats these days. They are miles in
Long
size.
lines, miles long.
Miles long.
Baited hooks every few feet.
Scooping up every single living thing, knowing that they're just going to pull out the things that are going to make them money, and whatever dies
Throwing
along the
rest
way,
away. Yeah.
throw it away.
This is not food security.
Yeah.
This is not good stewardship. And we who buy ocean wildlife are part of the problem. If you don't know where the fish has come from or what it has taken to capture it,
Well, now studies are even showing it may not even be the fish they tell you it is when they actually serve it to you, right? With the genetic testing, they're actually saying, oh, well, something like in London, there was a recent study that said something like 40% of the fish wasn't what it was labeled in the fish market. It was another species entirely.
Well, you kind of know when you get Kentucky Fried that it's chicken, right?
Kind of.
Kind of. Depends on where the chicken's raised and how
But they
it's
don't
raised.
say Kentucky Fried Bird.
Right.
That's good. You guys hear that?
But when you get a burger, it's probably beef. But you don't get a mammal burger, right? Or maybe it is. It's usually
There's some
beef.
companies working on things like that.
But with fish, you get fish and chips, you get fish chowder, you get catch of the day.
Popcorn shrimp.
What kind of fish, and what kind of shrimp? I mean, there are lots of different kinds of shrimp. And which ocean did it come from? And what method was used to capture it? You know, shrimping is one of the most destructive means of capturing ocean wildlife because it's like a bulldozer that takes the whole forest and you shake out a few songbirds, that is the shrimp, and you throw the forest away.
So what you are both talking about in terms of the ocean is our overuse of the ecosystem services.
It's lack of respect for life.
Lack of respect for life. And this is what Pope Francis and the SDGs both refer to as the ecological debt that we're accruing. And so one of the questions that we wonder about here in Silicon Valley is what can be done about this? And is it too late? Are we past a tipping point? Are we getting to a point of no return with all this damage that's being done to the ecosystem that provides, it's the life support system, as you said. Do you want to take that first, Jonathan?
I think what Sylvia said when she says for the first time we know is so important for us to wrap our heads around. We do know. We need everyone to know and understand. And I do believe things can be done. Some things are being done. There are people that are working on creating the next generation of submersibles that will take people down, scientists and others, to help us better appreciate and better understand. Sylvia's daughter, as a matter of fact, she's a great CEO woman. Her daughter is the CEO of a company here in the Bay Area that makes submarines for this purpose and ROVs. So there's
Thinking Autodesk to help us design some of the latest.
And so there's people like that on
technology and science.
Yeah,
We just want to keep making that link for all of us here.
On the other sort of end of that scale, there's a local company here that is a startup called Open ROV. You should know about Open ROV. They make a small, remotely operated vehicle that's $1,000 that anybody can get in and start exploring the ocean with. So there are plenty of examples of things like that where you can just start to get involved. And there's plenty of people that are there. There's an app for that. There's dozens of apps out there that will help you to better understand. And there are apps that will help you track sharks around the world. Sharks is a huge deal right now.
It is.
And it's an absolute sin why people are killing all these sharks. One fin. Sylvia's just back from Mexico, and while she was down there, sent me a photo of 5 sharks. And why don't you tell that story of that little boy and why people are killing sharks?
Well, the exciting thing was, in one day, in a protected area, Cabo Polmo, I saw 5 species of sharks. I mean, it's amazing. I am so thrilled anytime I go diving and see a shark. It means something right is happening.
Something right is happening.
Because, you know, it takes a healthy reef to be able to support these big predators.
I have a shark on my iPhone screen.
Yeah. The trouble is, you know, it was a young tiger shark. It was a mako shark. These oceanic with big black eyes. Oh, they're fabulous. A giant female hammerhead, and then there's a smaller hammerhead, a silky shark, and a blacktip shark. They're all dead. They had been caught by fishermen for their fins, and we arrived intending to go diving in this marine reserve, a miraculous place that really has prospered because, for the most part, things are protected within this relatively small area. And the fishermen said they caught these outside of the reserve, but they were cutting the fins off on the land right at the reserve on the beach. And so a little boy asked the fisherman, "Why are you killing the sharks? Please don't kill the sharks. I love sharks. The ocean needs sharks." And the fisherman just looked at him and said, "This is how we make our living. This is how we make our living." The thing is, what they were doing to make their living was taking away from others in the same community that make their living by offering to take crazy people such as I, who will pay big bucks for the privilege of coming to swim with sharks. In the little island nation of Palau, calculations have been done, and the president of Palau, Tommy Rumingasau, makes a point of saying a live shark is worth at least $2 million, and it lives for 20, 30, 50 years. They can live as old as humans. You can kill it, and you sell the fins for a few $100s once. You keep it alive, it can be a sustained source of revenue if you're just looking at the economics. But if you look at the economics of the ocean, a healthy ocean needs sharks. It needs tuna. It needs grouper and snapper and all the little things too. It needs a complete system. It's like a city. You take the garbage collectors away, and boy, you get into trouble fast.
And
the
so
taxi drivers, you know.
To answer your question after that story, is what's going to save it is innovation.
Okay.
There's no other single thing that can do it. And sometimes that innovation comes in the forms of technology. And there's lots of interesting people doing interesting, amazing things with technology out there as well. But that's only part of it. The other innovation piece of that is policy and programs. And an example of that is the fact that this place in Mexico she was a marine protected area. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Sylvia is all about, with her Mission Blue organization, creating more and more of these marine protected areas, these hope spots, she calls them, brilliant name for them. And there are more and more of them, and this is one of them down there. And what's special about that story was that little boy's reaction, because he will have that now as he grows up, and we may just have a generation of people down there who have a very different perspective. So that, combined with the technology innovations that we have, I believe are the only thing that are going to help us address these problems. I don't believe it's too late. I think we're both optimists and believe in accentuating the positive, but we're also realists and say we got to do something now.
We've got to do something now.
We've got to.
So we're going to start the film in just a couple minutes here, Racing Extinction, and Sylvia and Jonathan will be back up to answer a few questions after that. But I guess one sort of quick comment we might make is we've got a room full of future leaders of competence, conscience, and compassion from many different disciplines. Some are scientists, some are engineers, some are political science majors who might help with policy. What should they be doing to help address this problem now?
I'm going to give them the quick and easy thing, and then you do the longer term.
I'll give them a short one, too.
Okay, my quick and easy one is there's something you can all do starting right now, tonight, going forward. How many people will take the pledge tonight here with us and say, I will not use a plastic straw ever again? Believe it or not, that makes a huge difference to our oceans just by taking that pledge. You know, we didn't always used to have them. Get over it, right? You can get a metal one if you really need it, carry it around with you. But that one little thing, and by the way, you'll be surprised at how many other little plastic things you stop using. I'll say this because there's a study from last summer that says that every single seabird in the world today has ingested plastic in its stomach. 100% of them.
Most people have, too.
Yeah, we do too. So anyway, that's my one quick thing.
All right, well, I'll match this, but I want to go a little further.
Yeah, I knew you would.
We should take the pledge not to eat ocean wildlife because we don't need to do it. It's a choice. It's a luxury. Just think about fish and shrimp and lobsters and all those other cool animals that make the ocean the ocean. The ocean needs them. We don't need them. We can choose to leave them in the ocean. I'm just asking, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I ask you to think about it, that every tuna that you don't eat could be one that is swimming out there in the ocean. Every lobster that you choose not to eat, every shrimp, means that you're leaving something in the bank. You're choosing life over killing things. Anyway.
You'll never look at a big thing of popcorn shrimp the same again after tonight, after hearing that.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we're going to...
One more thing,
Oh,
quickly.
okay, yes.
You know, everyone can do something. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. You can look in the mirror, and you can say to yourself, what am I good at? What do I care about? What is it that I personally can do today, every day, that will make things a little better than they would be if I just sit around business as usual? You know, if everybody just took that pledge, it would be a revolutionary. And it means, when I say that, I mean with respect to respecting one another, humankind, of course, but respecting nature. Got to take care of the natural world as if our lives depend on it. Because, of course, they do. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for this lovely conversation, Sylvia and Jonathan. We're going to cue the movie so we can exit over here. And they'll be back afterwards to answer your questions, so think about them.
Thank you all so much for coming. I think that movie pretty much speaks for itself. No matter how many times I see that, it's still just as hard to watch. I would now like to invite Sylvia and Jonathan back up to the stage. And we also have Aparna here from Solar City and a collection of professors. We have Dr. Popper from economics, Dr. Hari Mix, he's a climate scientist. We have Dr. Virginia Matzik, restoration, and Dr. Don Hart, marine biology. And I would now like to invite, the audience to ask questions. I know I have plenty of questions after watching that. And yes, audience, please, if you have any questions.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really, really, really good question. You know, the reason that you want to stop using them is because they end up in the ocean for the most part. So whatever you can do to prevent that from happening is the big answer. But thank you for asking it, because what it's going to make me do now is go out and talk to some really smart people and find out what can we do with all those ones. I'm in the same boat. I haven't used a straw in a long time.
Use a glass one.
Yeah.
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel. Glass could be a little tricky, right? Break in your mouth there, right? But I got to find out, and I'm open to suggestions. What a great question. Whoever's tweeting, tonight? That's a great tweet. Let's ask the interwebs what they think we should do about that. I do know, by the way, I can tell you that we're involved in the whole 3D printing thing, right? That's a whole thing. One of the companies that I work closely with is working on figuring out ways to take recyclable materials or materials like straws, plastics, and have them be feedstock for 3D printers so that we can make useful things out of them. So that's one thing we can do is when we talk about technology and innovation is let's figure out how to take these things that we have already made and use them for something else, something useful.
It's an excellent idea. Yes. Yeah, in the back. Yes.
Hi. So we know that these traditional businesses that are dependent on the oceans are facing these squeezed margins in terms of funding their transition from a conventional business model to a more blue sustainable one. So my question is, how can these profit-seeking entities be incentivized to transition to these ocean-friendly businesses?
Dr. Popper, would you care to start us off with
Could you
that?
repeat the question?
How can we take companies that are, right now in these industries that are so damaging and repurpose them or kind of
Incentivize them.
Incentivize them, yeah, get them into these new areas.
Hi, thank you. I think a lot of us, we don't like taxes. We don't like to pay for things. And sometimes we think there was a picture early on in the film, sort of silhouette of someone using one of those blowers, leaf blowers. I think those are with the two-stroke engines. And we sometimes look down our noses at that kind of usage. And as an economist, I think of the person who's struggling with a business, or the person who's a sustainable business, or the person who is struggling with a business using a two-stroke engine with a bunch of competitors who are using those two-stroke engines too. And with kids, they want to get food for their kids, and they want to get them into good school or even any school, but they can't say, oh, I'm not going to use this machine because that's my business and I'll lose my job. Well, we can help that person, nudge them along with making the kind of decisions that are good for the environment by making very modest, to begin with, changes in the tax structure so that we tax what's bad and not what's good. And if we tax what's bad, if we tax carbon emissions, then we will help people do the things that probably most of them want to do anyway, and we will support businesses that are producing things that have to compete with what is now really cheap oil. So the kinds of ways to support businesses that will help us find solutions to the problem is to make the things that are expensive to the world, make them expensive to our pocketbooks. So we should tax what's bad and not what's good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Popper. Can we get a microphone?
Yeah.
And please speak into the microphone since we're recording this. That way we can.
I was just wondering if the farm-raised fisheries, is that just as bad? Farm-raised salmon, trout, is that just as bad as eating regular seafood?
Sylvia, would you care to speak to that?
I think aquaculture, smart aquaculture, has a future, but we're currently applying some not so smart methods for cultivating aquatic animals, salmon being kind of the poster fish for something that is amazing that it ever got started in the first place when you look at the life history of a salmon. There's several species, of course, but the one that is most commonly cultivated is the Atlantic salmon that is essentially gone from most of its natural habitat, and now where the great majority of Atlantic salmon that exist in salmon farms in the U.S., in New Zealand, in Chile, because some Norwegian scientists figured out how to cultivate the eggs in a captive circumstance. The flaw in the system basically is that these are carnivores. It takes several years to grow from an egg to a marketable size. And in nature, of course, it takes at least as long to grow from an egg to an adult. Raising carnivores to feed people is not a very smart way to go. We don't raise, I mean, when you think of the animals that we raise after 10,000 years of kind of selective which ones work, we've got cows and chickens and pigs and goats and sheep. They're all grazers, they're all plant eaters. Perversely now, we're taking wildlife from the sea, grinding it up and feeding to chickens and cows and pigs, but put that aside. We're also taking wild fish to feed to carnivorous, cultivated animals such as the salmon. You don't think of salmon perhaps as carnivores, but they eat fish. They eat meat. And it takes this many wild fish to get this many farm fish. It's not a good business model. And the only reason that it prospers at all is that the wild fish have a zero accounting base. They are considered to be free. All you have to do is go catch them, which is why wild fish are being fed to chickens and cows and pigs, because it's free goods out there the way we account for nature. We're going all the way to Antarctica, thousands of miles away from our farm animals, to catch krill, to grind up, to feed to cows and chickens and pigs, and salmon, and other things. So the reason for hope is that there are aquatic creatures, the tilapia, catfish, carp, that are plant eaters. They grow fast. They eat plants, for heaven's sakes. So it's about the same ratio of sunlight to plants to protein with catfish, tilapia, and carp as it is for chicken. And chickens feed a lot of people, those who want to eat birds. Chickens are a pretty good bet because sunlight plants 2 pounds of plants to make about a pound of chicken, and you grow in not years but a few months to get from an egg to a marketable piece of meat. So, in the film, the message came through loud and clear: eat more plants. Or if you're going to eat animals that eat plants. Stupid idea to take eagles or owls or lions or tigers or bears and try to cultivate them, and it's kind of not so smart to take salmon or even trout. They eat insects, but some are better choices than others. But smart aquaculture probably has a role somewhere, especially closed systems, not out in the ocean, but intensive areas where, in a small place, where you can control the flow of water. And it's a solution in some, especially island countries, where they're growing tilapia in a tank, if you will, and the fertilized water from the fish goes to a garden, and the water that goes into the garden is recovered and goes back into the fish tank. So you've got a big figure eight, if you will, that supplies high quality goods, if you will, vegetables and the fish that may serve as a model to be scaled up, but large-scale shrimp farming, large-scale salmon farming, just use our good brains and think what we learned over 10,000 years, and we can probably come up with some better choices.
It's easy to fall prey to the marketing. We are easily marketed to, and we were talking about it just earlier this evening, how tuna didn't used to be that big a deal, right? And then,
Trash fish.
yeah, tuna was. It wasn't the fish. And then, what a brilliant thing, Charlie tuna. Some of you are old enough to remember Charlie tuna. Chicken of the sea. Chicken of the sea. How's that for clever, right? And so we think, oh, chicken of the sea. Well, that sounds good.
So bluefin tuna takes about, according to Barbara Block at Stanford, 10 to 14 years to mature. And a chicken, you can go egg to producing chickens producing eggs in less than a year.
They are not chicken of the sea, and so we have to pay attention to all these
Oh my
things.
gosh,
Yeah.
they eat fish that eat fish that eat fish. It takes thousands of pounds of plants to make a single pound of tuna. So
We've been talking about awareness, and I think that's part of it as well. We have to be aware and smart consumers, and it's easy not to be, right? I mean, we know more about Kim Kardashian's rear end than we know about the ocean.
I think that's an excellent thing to keep in mind. Where we are on the
Kardashians what?
where we are.
What, Kim
on the,
Kardashian's right now?
I was about to say where we are on the food chain. That's a very important environmental consideration. Is try to eat as low down on the food chain as possible. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the film, and I was touched by the whole idea of that science and technology is coming to the rescue. But I'm wondering what is the role of GMO technology, where this technology might be used to lead to extinction rather than conservation of species.
Did you say old technology?
GMO.
Genetically
GMO.
modified.
Wow, well, GMO, of course, is a whole thing. We could have a whole evening on that particular subject right now. What I can tell you is that we have learned a lot in just the last few decades and just the last few years about genomics, genetics in general. And there are people that are looking at doing all kinds of interesting things. You might have heard about, there's in the news lately, this thing called CRISPR. And boy, is that all in the news about everything right now. And people are a little freaked out about it. I think one of the things to keep in mind is that this is happening. We are learning a lot. We are monkeying around as a species with these things. That's going to keep happening. That's what we do as people. When it comes to technology, technology is just a tool, and the tool sets are super important, but can't stress it enough. The mindset is also super important, and we need to deal with that. I think one example of where this might be interesting is, we talked about this earlier this evening, I think it was over, not here earlier, about how folks are looking at coral reefs. Coral reefs are super sensitive to temperature change. There are people that are trying to find out, can we identify the genes in the coral reef that cause them to be so sensitive to that temperature change and cause them to die, basically. And if they can we then take that gene out? It's very much like, can we identify the gene or gene set responsible for Alzheimer's disease and take that out? Can we identify the gene that keeps coral reefs, that causes them to die or be so sensitive to temperature change, and maybe take that out? It is certainly not the best solution, right? The best solution is stop it. We just got to stop warming the earth, acidifying the oceans, and we have to address the core problems, killing the oceans. We got to stop that. But maybe things like this, technologies like this, will buy us a little more time, help us to make things a little more resilient out there. So we'll see. I think the jury is out on the subject, but I'm still very hopeful that there's lots of positive things that can come out of this research. Look, it's never been a better time by way of percentage to be a human being and be alive than it is today. And I think that trend can continue, so I'm hopeful.
And I think one thing to keep in mind with GMOs is just how broad of a term that is, and it's kind of, a lot of times GMOs get classified into one category, but when you do that and try to put them paint into a black or white of GMOs good or bad, I mean, you have to consider that most of our food, like kale, lettuce, all of that is actually one species. There's one mustard plant that we managed to breed into all of these different plants, and this was well before the advent of modern genetics. And
doing GMO since 10,000 years.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to label a black or white, and I think that's important to consider because we have to take these like the CRISPR on a case-by-case basis and really consider the pros and cons of every single advancement rather than GMOs as a whole. We got what?
I think it's for the recording, for the video recording.
Do you have a sense of what is the population that the planet can sustain?
Humans?
Yes.
We like to say, people are optional on planet Earth. We really are optional. This wonderful big blue marble of ours, it can do just fine without us. It did for most of its existence just fine without us. The reality is, I don't know that anybody can truly answer that question, but the reality is by 2050 we're going to have, 9 billion people here on planet Earth? Well, I suppose the big experiment could go the other way. And 1 in 4 of them will be in Africa. So there'll be big changes. And there's big issues around how do we make sure that the 4 billion people who are coming at us pretty quickly, really, don't wake up every day saying, do I have enough to live today? Do I have a place to go that'll keep me alive today? How do we make sure they don't have those issues? So jump in.
I heard E.O. Wilson respond to that question once, and his answer was that optimally for the planet, that about 500 million people would be just about right. Just about right, 500 million. And we had 1 billion in 1800. But if you think about high quality space, food, pressure on the natural systems, even 500 million with the intent to destroy could do a pretty good job with the technology that we have today. So whether it's 500 million or 1 billion or 7 or 10, it really goes back to how we behave. As much as anything else, it's respect for the natural systems that make our lives possible. And we can be greedy, we can burn through the assets, just as we have been during all of our preceding time, or we can follow this beginning of an ethic of the reality of understanding that we can and we must, if we are to survive at any level, have greater respect for the needs of others, because we're all in this together, and to look at the carrying capacity for the planet as a whole. Some say that for all of the 7 billion people that we have to live at the quality that most of those in North America enjoy would take, 4 or 5 additional planets. The way we're burning through the assets, consuming the natural world, with whether it's trees or fish or water or space or whatever it is. I think your question is a really good one for all of us to face up to. It isn't just the quantity of people, it's the quality of life for everyone, to take what we've got and try to manage better lives and livelihoods. And to do so, we can't continue to burn through the natural assets at the rate that we have been, because it cannot continue and still have a planet that works in our favor. At least we know. Go back 50 years, we thought the ocean was too big to fail. Go back 1,000 years, trees were just in the way of some better purpose that we would have for the land. Don't have to go back even, a couple hundred years, and some people still feel that way. Clear the trees, plant whatever. We now are armed, at least, with better knowledge than ever before. So
if we had that mindset of respect that Sylvia's talking about, that mindset of mindfulness, that mindset of empathy, I suspect that number is significantly high.
Empathy, yeah.
And I think that brings back to the point that they mentioned in the movie of that when the U.S. went through its own growing pains, the population of the world was less than the population of China is today. So it's, it is a very complicated question. Does anybody else have a question for the panel? Can we get a microphone to the back?
Is there hope in the current situation in the United States government for change to be made through policy?
Sure.
So tempted to make some jokes right now, but I won't. It'd be so easy to. I'm hopeful. You know what? And we've spent time in Washington, D.C. with the people that are making policy and influencing policy and around the world with people, and I have to believe we're both hopeful because we keep doing it, right? We both keep doing that.
The alternative is give up, and you can't do that because that will be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, as they end the movie on that point, apathy defeats itself. Way in the back.
So in a lot of environmental issues, and in the movie they talked about the power of consumerism and the power in your own personal dollar. But what do you say to the people that say it's too difficult to give up meat, it's too inconvenient to not use straws anymore? And what do you say to the people that don't even want to have that conversation?
Perna, would you care to speak to this one? Working for Solar City, this is kind of in the green sector.
Absolutely. I think it's a very good question because there are a lot of people that probably think that it's hard to change the conventional way. But the truth is that there are a lot of businesses that are changing the conventional way of how we utilize and how we use certain resources. So for instance, luckily for me, growing up in India, the way I was raised is we didn't eat meat or we didn't eat fish. So I was like, while watching that movie and listening to Sylvia talk, I was like cheering myself and my parents that thank you so much for raising me right. But that's just how I was raised. But once I moved out to America and found my true calling professionally, I'm really proud to say that Solar City and Elon Musk, that was on the movie, the guy that started Tesla, he's also the chairman of our company, and his cousin brothers run it. And we are changing the quintessential way of how people consume electricity. So to your question, as opposed to meat and straws, that was the same thing that people said when we brought in the concept of using solar panels. Because a lot of people thought that, oh my gosh, it's going to be super complicated. I can just turn on and off my light switch at home and just use the grid conventionally. Why do I need to install solar on my roof? It makes it look ugly. And so we have pioneered and figured out a much easier way of doing that through different options that really give people an option to go solar without zero out of their pockets. It's just for businesses to wake up to the reality. And I think back to what you were talking about, just making businesses come up with creative and smart ideas to be able to create a path for the masses to adopt renewable resources. And going back to your question about, meat or folks that don't want to have that conversation, I think it's just awareness and education and for the economy to just come up with ways where the masses and mainstream can adopt all of these concepts, I think. So I hope that answers
Thank you,
at least a
Aparna.
portion of the question.
Yeah. We have time for one last question. In the red shirt.
Going off of that, of having friends and that type of stuff, what would watching this kind of video gets you fired up on environmental stuff? So what can we do right now, today, other than meat and straws, that can really make a difference, as students and as families and things like that?
Tell your story. Tell this story. More people need to hear this, right? It's just a huge thing. People don't. Look, a few people here on campus saw this, got this message tonight. Get more people to understand it. You just said it. You're fired up. Why? Because you saw this, because you had this experience here tonight. Share that experience and maybe even personalize it with people. That'll make it even more powerful. But we need to go viral like a good tweet, right? Again, I mean, I won't use what's-her-name's, rear, but there's crazy stuff that gets tweeted out there. Justin Bieber does something, and boom, millions of people instantly know about it.
Cause for hope.
Yeah.
It is that we get the word around so fast with ideas. Everything that happens in human society starts with somebody. Good stuff and bad stuff. It starts with somebody, an individual. Why not you? Or you, or you? Everything starts somewhere. When you peel back the layers, how did this get started? It's somebody got it going. 1 + 2 + 6 + whatever, and soon you've got a change. And sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's really bad. But it is the way the world works. So never for an instant should you think you do not have power. Everyone has power. Everyone. A lot of people just sit on it and don't use it. But maybe that's a good thing because there are a lot of negative things or fads that start rolling. Eating sushi, why are we doing that? Somebody, it's marketing, if you will.
It is.
So we need to be better marketers of good ideas, good policies, good behavior. And it can start anywhere, at any time, with anyone.
Our ideas are like cells, right? They divide and multiply, and just like life, they spread like crazy. I mean, look, everything we have as a human species is because of ideas doing that over long periods of time. Let's control which of those ideas are the ones that are getting out there virally. You can do that. We can do that together. Matter of fact, that's the only way, I think I said it before, it's the only way we're going to be able to solve these challenges, address these issues, is if we get everybody involved in doing something, telling their story, spreading the word.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. If you'd care to continue the conversation tomorrow, we have a Green Club meeting in Kennedy 108 at 7:30. If you'd care to continue to talk about this and digest it. And we will be, as they mentioned at the end, the challenge, we'll be launching that here on campus. So we challenge all of you to do one thing and to commit to that. And then on Earth Day on the 22nd, we will have a banner up where you can write in or draw in or however you want to display what you've committed to over the last month and a half.
Dive in.
Yeah, dive in, exactly. Yeah, and really let's make this big. I'd now like to invite Dr. Kreiner back up to the stage to close the evening.
Thank you very much, Sean. Really great job facilitating. Wonderful to have students like Sean and all of you here who are committing to take some action. I just want to take a couple minutes really quickly to wrap up here and thank our amazing explorers. Each of you can be an explorer, which is part of the Jesuit tradition. So first, Sylvia, it is such an honor to meet you. You have been my heroine since I started diving in 1994, before many of you were born. And we have a very special gift for you here. You'll like this. This is actually a wine made at the Novitiate Winery.
Thank you.
We've got a Miller Center t-shirt here for you.
Whoa, great.
And we also have a scarf made by one of our social entrepreneurs with dyes made from plants. So it's completely sustainable and you can wear it with pride. Avani is the name of the social enterprise.
Very nice.
Jonathan, having people in technology in Silicon Valley like you is what gives me hope for the future, that Silicon Valley can actually change the world. And we are very grateful for what you've done. Of course, we have wine for you.
Thank you.
And also a t-shirt.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to invite Dana up here. This evening would not have happened without Dana's vision. And we were talking earlier, in fact, Sylvia started the evening talking about how all these cycles of life, the chemistry of life, are all connected, the interconnectedness. And we see a small example of that here, that I met Dana because one of our trustees, Betsy Raphael, who's also on our advisory board, introduced me to her. We had a very simple conversation, and she had this amazing passion. She knew Jonathan, Jonathan knew Sylvia, and here we are.
Rest
so
is
thank
history.
you. The rest is history.
Web
So
of
thank
life.
you so much, Dana. Thank you. And that's the end of the evening. Go forth change the world, protect the planet, serve the poor. Thank you.